My name is Adrian Crowell. I'm 38 years old, and I teach history at Providence College in Rhode Island. For 8 years, I believed I had built something solid with my wife, Celine Armitage. We met during graduate school in 2015, married in 2017, and I thought we shared the same dreams. I contributed every penny I earned to our life together, even using part of my grandfather's inheritance to buy our house on Elmwood Avenue in 2019. It was a modest 2-story colonial, nothing fancy, but it was ours. The purchase price was $285,000, which was reasonable for the Providence area at the time. I've always been the quiet type, analytical. I don't raise my voice, don't seek confrontation. I solve problems with patience and logic, the same way I approach teaching. My students respect that about me, and I thought my wife did too. Looking back, I realized that what I saw as strength, she must have seen as weakness. That was my first mistake. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but I thought it was stable. We had our routines. I'd grade papers in the evening while she worked on her laptop, managing social media accounts for small businesses through Instagram and Facebook. We'd share dinner, watch Netflix, discuss our days. Normal couple stuff. At least that's what I believed was happening. The first signs appeared in early 2024. Celine started taking trips. Women's retreats, she called them. Weekend getaways to find herself and attend personal growth workshops. She'd return with expensive jewelry, new clothes, designer bags that seemed way beyond what her freelance income could afford. When I asked about it, she'd smile and say she'd made new connections, found better clients. I trusted her. That was my second mistake. Then came the financial irregularities, small at first. $20 here, $50 there. Cash withdrawals that didn't match our usual spending patterns. When I mentioned it, Celine would get defensive. "You're micromanaging me, Adrian. I need some freedom with money, too." So I backed off. I always backed off. That was becoming a pattern. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new, unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. 2 months ago, in early July 2025, everything changed. It was a Tuesday evening. The summer heat was oppressive, and I was reviewing lesson plans for the fall semester. Celine had been unusually quiet during dinner, picking at her food, checking her phone constantly. I should have recognized the signs, but I was focused on my work, thinking about the American Revolution unit I needed to update. "Adrian, we need to talk," she said. Her tone was different, cold, businesslike. She wasn't looking at me, just staring at some spot on the kitchen wall behind my head. I set down my pen and gave her my attention. "What's on your mind?" She took a breath, and what came next felt rehearsed, practiced, like she'd said it to herself in the mirror dozens of times. "I want a divorce." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. Years of teaching had taught me to control my reactions, especially when dealing with unexpected situations. "Okay," I said quietly. "Can we talk about what's wrong? What can we work on?" She shook her head. "There's nothing to work on. I'm done. I've already spoken to a lawyer." Already spoken to a lawyer, of course she had. This wasn't a conversation, it was a notification. "I see," I said. "What are you thinking in terms of arrangements?" This was when her mask slipped and I saw something I'd never seen before. Calculation. Pure, cold calculation. The house will be mine. I contributed to it too, and I need stability during this transition. I want 70% of our savings account. "And you'll pay me alimony for 5 years. My lawyer says that's reasonable, considering I gave up career opportunities to support your academic pursuits." Each demand felt like another slap. The house my grandfather had helped us buy. The savings account I'd filled with my professor's salary of $78,000 per year while she claimed to be building her business. Alimony for a woman who'd never actually supported my career in any meaningful way. But it was her final statement that truly revealed who she'd become. She looked directly at me for the first time that evening, and her smile was arctic. "You're just a teacher, Adrian. You don't have the money for a real lawyer. You can't fight me on this." I sat there for a long moment processing what I'd just heard. Not just the legal demands, but the contempt behind them, the assumption that I was powerless. The belief that 8 years of marriage could be dissolved with such casual cruelty. "I understand," I said finally. She seemed surprised by my calm response. Maybe she expected anger, tears, desperate bargaining. Instead, I simply nodded. "I'll need some time to process this," I continued. "Can we revisit the details in a few days?" "Sure," she said, but her smile suggested she thought the conversation was already over, that I'd accepted defeat before the battle had even begun. That night, while Selene slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. She was right about one thing. I didn't have money for an expensive divorce attorney. My professor's salary was comfortable but not extravagant. Her lawyer would cost more per hour than I made in a day. But she was wrong about something much more important. She assumed I had no options, no resources, no one to turn to. She had forgotten about my brother, Lucian Draven, my older brother by 4 years, and one of the most feared divorce attorneys in Rhode Island. We hadn't spoken in almost a decade, not since our father's funeral in 2016, when we had a bitter argument about family obligations and career choices. He thought I was wasting my potential in academia. I thought he was a soulless corporate shark. We were both probably right. But Lucian was also brilliant, ruthless, and expensive. The kind of lawyer who charged $450 per hour in 2025 and was worth every penny. He specialized in high-stakes divorce cases, representing CEOs, politicians, and celebrities. His reputation was built on finding weaknesses in opposing cases and exploiting them with surgical precision. The legal community respected him. His opponents feared him. The morning after Celine's ultimatum, I sat in my office reviewing everything I knew about our finances. As a history professor, I'm trained to analyze evidence, to piece together narratives from scattered documents. I applied those same skills to my marriage, and what I found was troubling. Over the past 18 months, there had been consistent cash withdrawals from our joint account, always in amounts just under $500, probably to avoid triggering bank notifications. The timing coincided with her weekend trips. But more interesting were the credit card charges I'd never paid attention to before. Expensive restaurants in Boston, hotel rooms in Hartford, jewelry stores in Manhattan, all on days when she'd claimed to be at those women's retreats. I called my friend Marcus Thompson, a CPA who'd helped me with tax preparation for years. "Marcus, I need a favor. Can you look at some bank statements? Unofficial consultation." "What's going on, Adrian?" "Celine wants a divorce. I need to understand our financial picture before I respond." He agreed to meet that afternoon. When I showed him the evidence, Marcus whistled low. "Adrian, this looks like systematic diversion of marital assets. These patterns suggest she's been funding something significant, or someone." "How significant are we talking?" He ran some quick calculations. "Based on these withdrawals and charges, at least $32,000 over 18 months, maybe more if she had other accounts you don't know about." $32,000. That was nearly half our total savings. Money I'd assumed was going toward household expenses and her business investments. Money that was apparently buying someone else's affection. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I researched my own brother. His law firm's website was impressive. Draven, Walsh, and Associates, specializing in complex family law. Client testimonials praised his thoroughness and results. Legal blogs mentioned his recent victories in high-profile cases. He'd built exactly the career he'd always wanted. His success stung a little. While I'd been content with my modest professor's life, he'd become a legal powerhouse. But pride was a luxury I couldn't afford now. I found his direct office number and stared at my phone for 20 minutes before dialing. It rang 3 times. Lucian Draven. His voice was deeper than I remembered, more authoritative. The voice of someone accustomed to being in control. "Lucian, it's Adrian." Long pause. "Adrian, it's been a while." 9 years, I said. 9 years, he agreed. "What's the occasion?" I could hear the wariness in his tone. We'd parted on such bitter terms that a social call seemed impossible. I need help. Legal help. Another pause. What kind of legal help? Celine wants a divorce. She's making demands that seem aggressive. I think she's been diverting marital assets to fund an affair. The line went quiet for so long, I thought he might have hung up. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted from wary to cautiously interested. That's a serious allegation, Adrian. Are you certain? I have documentation, bank records, credit card statements. Marcus Thompson looked at them and thinks there's a pattern. Marcus is good, Lucian said slowly. If he sees something, it's worth investigating. But Adrian, I need to ask, why are you calling me? We haven't exactly been close. The question hung between us like a bridge I wasn't sure I could cross. Because despite everything that happened between us, you're still my brother. And because she looked me in the eye and told me I was powerless, I'd like to prove her wrong. Another long pause. When Lucian spoke again, there was something different in his voice. Not warmth exactly, but recognition. All right, I'll take a preliminary look. No promises, but send me what you have. If there's something there, we'll discuss terms. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me yet. Thank me if we win. Over the next month, I became a forensic accountant of my own life. Every receipt, every statement, every financial record went into carefully organized files. Lucian's initial review was promising enough that he agreed to take the case, though he warned me that Celine's attorney might be more formidable than expected. James Morrison doesn't take cases he can't win, Lucian told me during our first official meeting. If he's confident, it means Celine has convinced him she's in the right. That could work in our favor if we can prove she's been lying to him too. Lucian hired an investigator, a former police detective named Sarah Martinez, to trace Celine's activities. While Sarah worked, Lucian prepared our counter-strategy. The relationship between us was still formal, professional, but I could see glimpses of the brother I remembered in the way he explained legal concepts, patient but thorough. The key, he said, is not just proving she took the money. It's proving she did it deliberately to defraud the marriage while planning to leave. That transforms this from a property dispute into a fraud case. 3 weeks into the investigation, Sarah hit pay dirt. The expensive dinners weren't random. They followed a pattern, always in cities where a man named David Walsh was traveling for business. David was a pharmaceutical sales rep based in Hartford, divorced, with a LinkedIn profile that showed him at conferences in the same cities where Celine had claimed to be attending women's retreats. She's been seeing this guy for over a year, Sarah reported. Hotel records show they've been meeting regularly. The jewelry purchases align with significant dates in their relationship. She's not just having an affair, Adrian. She's been living a double life. Lucian leaned back in his leather chair, studying the evidence spread across his desk. This changes the entire dynamic. Morrison thinks he's handling a routine dissolution with an advantageous settlement. He has no idea his client has been committing fraud. What do we do with this? We wait. Let them file their petition with all their confident demands. Then we respond with evidence they never saw coming. The shock value alone will be worth the element of surprise. The first hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in late July at the Providence County Family Court. Celine had been pushing for a quick resolution, probably hoping to catch me off guard before I could mount a proper defense. Her attorney, James Morrison, was known for aggressive tactics and intimidating opposing counsel who couldn't afford extended litigation. They were expecting me to show up alone, overwhelmed, and ready to accept whatever terms they offered. They were about to get the surprise of their lives. I arrived at the courthouse at 8:30 a.m., 30 minutes before our scheduled hearing. The building was imposing, all granite columns and stern federal architecture, designed to remind everyone inside that justice was serious business. I wore my best suit, the navy blue one I reserved for faculty presentations and important occasions. I felt nervous but also strangely calm. Everything was out of my hands now. Celine was already in the hallway with Morrison reviewing documents. She dressed for battle, sharp black business suit, hair pulled back severely, the kind of look that said she meant business. When she saw me approach, her expression was almost pitying. like she was about to do something unpleasant but necessary. "Adrian," she said with false warmth, "I hope you've had time to consider our proposal. We can still settle this amicably." Morrison stepped forward. He was exactly what I'd expected. Expensive suit, aggressive handshake, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "Mr. Crowell, I'm James Morrison. I represent your wife. I understand you're proceeding without counsel." "Actually," I said, checking my watch, "my attorney should be here any moment." Celine's eyebrows rose slightly. "Attorney? Adrian, I thought we discussed this. You can't afford—" She stopped mid-sentence. Her face went completely white. Lucian had arrived. He walked down the courthouse hallway like he owned it, which in many ways he did. Impeccable charcoal gray suit, Italian leather briefcase, the kind of presence that made other lawyers step aside. At 42, my brother had the bearing of someone who'd never lost a case he cared about winning. His reputation preceded him into every room. "Sorry, I'm late," he said, extending his hand to me. Traffic was hell on I-95. Morrison's face had gone through several interesting color changes. "Lucian Draven? You're representing Mr. Crowell?" "That's right. Adrian Crowell is my client." Lucian's smile was professional, but cold. "And my brother." The silence that followed was deafening. Celine looked like she might faint. Morrison was rapidly recalculating every assumption he'd made about this case. The other attorneys in the hallway had stopped their conversations to watch. Everyone knew who Lucian was. "I wasn't aware Mr. Crowell had retained counsel of your caliber," Morrison said carefully. "Well, now you are. Shall we go in? I believe Judge Patterson is waiting." The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, but it felt like a coliseum. Judge Patricia Patterson was known for running an efficient docket and having little patience for theatrics. She'd been on the family court bench for 15 years and had seen every dirty trick in the book. "Good morning," she said as we took our seats. "I have a petition for dissolution of marriage filed by Mrs. Celine Armitage Crowell against Mr. Adrian Crowell. Mrs. Crowell is represented by Mr. Morrison. Mr. Crowell is represented by—" She paused, looking at her paperwork. "Mr. Lucian Draven. This is unusual." "Your Honor," Morrison began, "we're seeking a straightforward dissolution with terms we believe are reasonable given the circumstances of the marriage." Judge Patterson nodded. "Mr. Draven, I assume you have a response?" Lucian stood smoothly. "Indeed we do, Your Honor. We're filing a counterpetition that includes several serious allegations. My client has discovered evidence of systematic diversion of marital assets by Mrs. Crowell to fund an extramarital relationship. We're requesting a complete financial audit, reimbursement of misappropriated funds, and sanctions against the petitioner for fraudulent concealment." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Morrison was frantically shuffling through papers, clearly caught off guard. Celine had gone pale again, her hands gripping the edge of the defendant's table. "That's a serious allegation, Mr. Draven," Judge Patterson said. "Do you have documentation to support these claims?" "Extensive documentation, Your Honor. Bank records, credit card statements, hotel receipts, travel records, and photographic evidence of Mrs. Crowell's activities over the past 18 months. We also have testimony from a private investigator regarding Mrs. Crowell's relationship with one David Walsh of Hartford, Connecticut." I watched Celine's face crumble. The mention of David's name hit her like a physical blow. Morrison leaned over to whisper urgently in her ear, but she was barely responsive. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Judge Patterson reviewed the initial paperwork. "Mrs. Crowell, are you prepared to respond to these allegations?" Morrison stood shakily. "Your Honor, we need time to review these claims. We weren't prepared for this level of complexity in what we anticipated would be a routine dissolution. Mr. Morrison, your client made very specific financial demands in her initial petition. 70% of marital assets, 5 years of alimony, and sole ownership of the marital home. Those demands suggest she was very prepared for complexity." Lucian stepped forward. "Your Honor, if I may. Mrs. Crowell's demands become particularly interesting when viewed in light of her spending patterns. She's requesting alimony while simultaneously having spent approximately $32,000 of marital funds on her relationship with Mr. Walsh. She wants the house while having systematically depleted the savings that helped purchase it. This isn't a dissolution petition, Your Honor. It's an attempted heist. The phrase, attempted heist, hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot. Even I had to admire Lucien's flair for dramatic timing. Morrison looked like he wanted to object, but he had nothing to object to. The facts were the facts. Judge Patterson set down her papers. I'm going to order a complete financial audit of both parties' assets and spending for the past 2 years. I'm also going to appoint a guardian ad litem to ensure all marital assets are properly accounted for. Mrs. Crowell, you are enjoined from disposing of any marital property or assets pending resolution of this matter. We'll reconvene in 6 weeks. As the hearing concluded, I could see Celine's entire strategy collapsing in real time. Her confident demands had been replaced by legal jeopardy. Her quick settlement had become a prolonged investigation. Her assumption that I was powerless had been shattered by the presence of one man in an expensive suit. Outside the courthouse, Morrison pulled Celine aside for what looked like a very unpleasant conversation. I could see her gesturing frantically, probably trying to explain why she hadn't mentioned the affair or the spending. Morrison kept shaking his head, clearly realizing his client had lied to him about material facts. Lucien watched them with clinical interest. She's about to fire her attorney, he said quietly. How can you tell? Body language. He's realizing she's made him look incompetent in front of Judge Patterson. Morrison has a reputation to protect. He's not going to let a lying client destroy it. Sure enough, Morrison walked away from Celine and headed toward the parking garage without looking back. She stood alone on the courthouse steps, looking lost and desperate. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. What happens now? I asked. Lucien packed his briefcase methodically. Now we wait for the audit results and prepare for the final hearing. She wanted a war, Adrian. But wars have consequences. She's about to learn what it costs to underestimate a Crowell. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. It felt good. The 6 weeks between hearings passed quickly. The court-ordered financial audit was conducted by a forensic accountant who specialized in divorce cases. Every transaction, every withdrawal, every credit card charge was scrutinized with microscopic detail. Meanwhile, Sarah continued gathering evidence about Celine's relationship with David Walsh. What we discovered exceeded even our worst expectations. The audit revealed that Celine had diverted nearly $44,000 over 18 months, not the $32,000 we'd initially calculated. She'd opened a secret credit card in her maiden name, taken cash advances against it, and used our joint account to make the payments. She'd also forged my signature on a home equity line of credit application, borrowing $18,000 against our house without my knowledge. But the most damaging evidence came from David Walsh himself. Sarah had tracked him down at a pharmaceutical conference in Boston. Faced with the possibility of being named as a co-defendant in a fraud case, David decided cooperation was his best option. He provided detailed records of their relationship, including text messages, hotel receipts, and photos Celine had sent him. Most importantly, he admitted that Celine had told him she was already divorced, and that I was paying her substantial alimony. She'd been lying to everyone, including her lover. 2 weeks before our return hearing, Morrison formally withdrew as Celine's counsel, citing irreconcilable differences regarding case strategy. In layman's terms, he discovered she'd lied to him about material facts, making it impossible for him to represent her ethically. She was forced to find new representation on short notice, eventually settling for a junior associate from a low-tier firm who specialized in simple divorces, not complex fraud cases. During this period, something unexpected happened between Lucien and me. The professional relationship began to thaw into something more personal. We started meeting for coffee to discuss the case, but our conversations would drift into other topics. The argument that had divided us in 2016 seemed smaller now, less important than the fact that we were family. I owe you an apology, I said during one of these meetings. What I said at Dad's funeral about your career choices, I was wrong. You've built something impressive here. Lucian stirred his coffee thoughtfully. And I was wrong about academia being a waste of your talents. You found your place, your purpose. That matters more than making money. It wasn't a complete reconciliation. 9 years of silence doesn't disappear overnight. But it was a start. The contrast on our return court date in early September was stark. Where Celine had once appeared confident and in control, she now looked haggard and desperate. Her new attorney, a nervous young man named Robert Hayes, was clearly in over his head. His hands shook as he organized his papers, and he kept glancing at Lucian like a rabbit watching a wolf. Judge Patterson reviewed the audit results with the thoroughness they deserved. The numbers were damning, but it was the pattern that told the real story. Systematic deception, ongoing fraud, and complete betrayal of marital trust. Mrs. Crowell, Judge Patterson said, the evidence suggests you've diverted substantial marital assets for personal use during an extramarital relationship. Do you dispute these findings? Hayes whispered urgently to Celine before standing. Your Honor, my client acknowledges certain financial irregularities, but maintains that her requests for asset division remain reasonable. Lucian stood immediately. Your Honor, Mrs. Crowell didn't commit financial irregularities. She committed fraud. She forged my client's signature on loan documents, opened secret credit accounts, and systematically stole from their joint savings to fund an affair she's maintained for over a year. This isn't a marriage dissolution. It's a criminal matter. The word criminal hit the courtroom like a thunderbolt. Hayes went pale. Celine gripped the table so hard her knuckles went white, and even I felt the weight of it. Lucian wasn't just destroying her civil case. He was threatening her freedom. Judge Patterson's expression was grim. Mr. Draven, are you suggesting this court should refer this matter for criminal prosecution? I'm suggesting, Your Honor, that Mrs. Crowell's actions constitute felony fraud under Rhode Island law. However, my client is primarily interested in recovering his stolen assets and dissolving this marriage without further financial harm. It was masterful. Lucian was offering Celine a way out of criminal charges, but only if she abandoned her ridiculous demands and accepted reasonable terms. The threat was implicit but clear. Take the deal or face prosecution. Hayes requested a brief recess to consult with his client. I watched them huddle in the corner, Celine gesturing frantically while Hayes shook his head repeatedly. When they returned, her fight was gone. The confident woman who had delivered her ultimatum 2 months ago had been replaced by someone desperate to avoid prison. Your Honor, Hayes said quietly, my client is prepared to accept a revised settlement. The final terms were nothing like Celine's original demands. She received no alimony. The house would be sold, with proceeds split 50-50 after she repaid the diverted funds. She kept her personal possessions and half of what remained in our legitimate joint savings after reimbursing the fraudulent expenditures. She was also required to pay Lucian's legal fees, which totaled $18,500. Most importantly, she signed a comprehensive release acknowledging her financial misconduct and waiving any future claims against me. When Judge Patterson signed the dissolution order, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The marriage was over, but so was the uncertainty, the betrayal, and the fear of financial ruin. Outside the courthouse, Celine approached me one last time. David Walsh had abandoned her when the legal trouble began. Her friends had distanced themselves when the scandal broke, and her reputation was in ruins. She looked broken, much older than her 35 years. Adrian, she said quietly, I never meant for it to go this far. I looked at her for a long moment, remembering the woman I'd married, trying to reconcile that memory with the person who'd tried to destroy me. Yes, you did, Celine. You meant for it to go exactly this far. You just didn't expect me to fight back. She had nothing to say to that. A week later, I moved into a small but comfortable house in the Federal Hill neighborhood, not far from the college. It was mine, completely and legally, bought with my portion of our asset division. The purchase price was $405,000, and the mortgage payments were manageable on my professor's salary. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely content with my living situation. But the most important change in my life wasn't the house or the financial resolution. It was the relationship I'd rebuilt with my brother. Lucian and I began meeting for dinner every few weeks, gradually bridging the gap that 9 years of silence had created. We talked about our father, about the argument that had driven us apart in 2016, about the different paths we'd chosen. We were different people now, more mature, less concerned with being right than with being family. "You know," he said during one of our dinners at a restaurant in downtown Providence, "I always wondered if you'd made the right choice, staying in academia. Now I think maybe you did. You have something I don't." "What's that?" "Peace. Integrity. You became exactly who you wanted to be, not who circumstances forced you to become." It was the first time in our adult lives that my older brother had expressed respect for my choices. It meant more than any legal victory. Last week, I received word that Celine had moved to Florida, starting over with a new identity and what remained of her resources. David Walsh had apparently moved on to his next married woman. The house we'd shared was sold to a young couple with small children, who'd fill it with laughter and hope instead of lies and betrayal. I never saw her again, and I never wanted to. The experience taught me something valuable about appearances and assumptions. Celine had looked at me and seen weakness where there was actually strength. She'd assumed isolation where there was actually family. She'd mistaken my quiet nature for powerlessness, not realizing that sometimes the most dangerous opponents are the ones who don't make noise. I'm still teaching at Providence College, still grading papers and discussing the American Revolution with students who think they understand conflict, but I understand it differently now. I know that the most decisive battles aren't always fought with raised voices and dramatic gestures. Sometimes they're won by patient preparation, careful documentation, and knowing when to make the right phone call. And I know that family, even complicated family, is worth more than pride. My name is Adrian Crowell. I'm 38 years old, and I'm exactly where I belong. Celine tried to take everything from me, but in the end, she gave me something more valuable than anything she could have stolen. She gave me my brother back. The best revenge, I learned, isn't always what you take from your enemies. Sometimes it's what they accidentally give you while trying to destroy you. If you enjoyed this story, like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notifications for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.